From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
Good Sunday morning and happy Easter. After nearly a decade, a resolution in the securities fraud charges against Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. We're sitting down with the journalist who has covered this story since it broke. But first, let's get to the three things you need to know in Texas politics. U.S. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson traveled to Texas to meet with Governor Greg Abbott Thursday. Media was not invited, but the governor's office tells us the two met at the governor's mansion and talked about the border. We're told Governor Abbott urged Speaker Johnson to support the state's efforts to secure the border and encouraged Congress to pass border security legislation to help stop illegal border crossings. A controversial Texas immigration law will remain on hold. Senate Bill 4 would allow police in Texas to arrest people suspected of illegally entering the country. Late Tuesday night, a three-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a 2-1 ruling temporarily pausing the law. A judge writing, quote, "For nearly 150 years, the Supreme Court has held that the power to control immigration, the entry, admission, and removal of non-citizens, is exclusively a federal power." End quote. The one dissenting judge wrote Texas is supposed to retain at least some of its sovereignty. The court previously paused the law from going into effect as the legal battle on the constitutionality of SB 4 plays out in court. This latest order ensures enforcement remains on hold until that decision is made.
Texas will be the launch pad for Mars. And as we look to the future of space, one thing is clear. Those who reach for the stars do so from the Lone Star State, the great state of Texas.
Texas now has its own Space Commission. Governor Greg Abbott made the announcement at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston Tuesday. He says the commission will promote innovation in the space, aeronautics, and aviation industries in Texas, leading humanity to other planets. In 2015, 8 months after he was elected Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton was indicted on 3 charges of securities fraud. This week, those charges were resolved in a pre-trial agreement. The special prosecutor will drop the charges if within 18 months, Paxton performs 100 hours of community service in Collin County, where the charges originated, takes 15 hours of legal ethics classes, and pays about $271,000 in restitution to the 2 people who invested in a Dallas tech startup after he solicited their investments. Lauren McGaughy, investigative reporter and editor for the Texas Newsroom, joined me to talk about the resolution of the case. You know, you have been following this story, these charges, since they were first filed against Ken Paxton. Take us back to 2015. You were with a different news agency.
I was two jobs ago.
2 jobs ago. Tell us about all of this, how it unfolded, how it broke.
Sure. So this was summer 2015, and it was obviously big news. Ken Paxton had just been elected AG the previous fall, and he was taking on his first statewide job. And then news breaks that a grand jury in Collin County indicted him for securities fraud. These were really serious charges. They were 2 first-degree felonies and 1 third-degree felony. So if he had actually gone to trial, the penalties were 10 to 99 years in prison for each of the first-degree charges alone. And so it was a very serious case.
Yeah. And what was he alleged to have done?
It sounds pretty wonky and kind of maybe boring. The way that I try to distill it is he was accused of duping his friends to invest in a company. They say that he misled them and that he had a financial interest, that he was in league with the CEO, got them to invest without telling him that, you know, maybe he had an ulterior motive. So that was the one charge. And then the 3rd-degree charge was he was also funneling clients to a friend's investment advisement firm, and he should have been registered with the state, and he wasn't.
And so at that time, again, when this was happening, he was not Attorney General, but he was certainly well known in Texas.
That's right. So the allegations date to when he was in the state legislature, in the state house, but when he was charged, he was Attorney General.
Yeah. So here we are, and it's been 9 years of back and forth about defense and prosecutors and who's paying. What has been the legal holdup? What has taken us 9 years to get to this point?
A lot of things. So, both sides like to play the blame game with the prosecutors blaming Paxton's defense and vice versa, but really both of them contributed to the delay. There have been 4 judges on the case. Paxton has got 3 judges removed, claiming that they didn't have the authority to try the case. The prosecutors had the cases moved from Collin County to Houston. Then they got moved back to Collin County, then back to Houston. So that was a big delay. But probably the thing that pushed this whole thing back the most was a fight over how much the prosecutors should be paid. That spun off a whole separate lawsuit that went through the courts, and they're actually still fighting that. So that fight isn't even resolved at this point.
With this deal that was reached, obviously people would say this is a great thing for Paxton, right?
Yeah, well, people have been very critical of the deal who thought that he should have gone to trial. So yes, Paxton's lawyers say that we won. This proves our guy was always innocent, wrongly accused. But the prosecutors are trying to spin this as a win for them too, which hasn't been taken very well by a lot of people. In fact, at this press conference after the deal, the prosecutors were saying that they've actually been getting a slew of calls and emails criticizing them for cutting a deal instead of going to trial. So, they say they sought justice and they got it, but obviously a lot of people don't agree with that.
So when we think about the timing of all of this, 3 weeks before they are finally set to go to trial, and they've been fighting to go to trial, as you pointed out, for a long time, and a deal is cut.
Yeah.
This does not necessarily bode well for the prosecutors in the eyes of a lot of people.
Yeah, they would say they're all good. Their hands are clean. They did their job. But there have been a lot of questions about why now. They said they couldn't have cut a deal previously because the case was in appeals and there were all these side fights going on. They also said that they wanted Paxton to pay restitution to the accusers, that he wasn't going to do that until now. That's something that we're looking into. We want to fact check that and see if a deal like this could have been reached at some point in the 9 years. But, it did seem like we were on the precipice of actually seeing a sitting attorney general go to trial for fraud, and suddenly everything gets scuttled.
Yeah. When we talk about what happened in terms of him having to pay, one of the questions that we get from people is, okay, wait, is this taxpayer money that's going to be able to use to pay that restitution? That's not the case. This is separate from the Office of the Attorney General. We're
going to have to see what cash he uses, but the prosecutors say he can't use campaign cash even. He has to use his personal funds. But Paxton has used his campaign funds in the past to pay for the lawyers, for example, in his impeachment trial. Usually there has to be some link to his official office to use campaign money, but he has set new precedent in all of his legal troubles and what kind of money he can use to pay for lawyers and the like. So, but you are right. As far as we know, no taxpayer money will be used to pay the $271,000 restitution.
But this is not the end of the legal things facing the Attorney General.
No, more headlines probably to come. He's still under FBI investigation. So all those corruption allegations in the impeachment trial, the FBI is investigating him for those. This is self-dealing, abuse of office, dealing with this Austin real estate developer, Nate Paul. Nate Paul has already been charged by the feds for separate issues, separate financial crimes, alleged financial crimes. No charges filed yet against Paxton, but that could be coming. And he is being sued in 2 other cases, civil cases that deal with his challenge of the 2020 presidential election results and these same corruption allegations, the whistleblower lawsuit that many of us are familiar with that led to the impeachment. That is still active and in the courts.
Yeah. So still some things to go, but I spoke with political analysts who say, but this particular resolution strengthens Ken Paxton in Texas.
For sure. I mean, think about it. He's had 2 huge wins in the last, 6 months, beating the impeachment charges and now getting rid of these serious felony charges that he would have gone to trial. Public airing in a court would have been very embarrassing for him, or could have been very embarrassing. Now they go away, and yeah, he still has these other problems that could be on the horizon, but I mean, 2 home runs in a row, really, for him. So I'm sure that he celebrated last week, and he's ascendant. He's, becoming even more of a national figure. His ties to Donald Trump are helping him along. There's chatter about, will he run for some kind of a federal office, or could he get a cabinet position? So his star politically is definitely on the rise.
You can read more about Paxton's deal and the other legal challenges he's facing at KVUE.com. That's Texas This Week.